tricky thing that's a bit different than what we're used to for fire. It's just a different world for them.
Yep. So now let's get into time. Um, Cult Aspirant is our first time card. This is an uncommon. It is a 1/1 for 1, and it has Overwhelm. Weird ability on a 1/1 for 1.
Yeah.
It has a relevant ability, though. It has Life Force, our first instance of this in the set review, which of course means that when you gain life, something happens. In this case, when you gain life, Cult Aspirant gets +1/+1. This is one of the core cards in a lot of the Life Force decks, or it's a really powerful payoff card.
Right.
Because if you're able to generate life continuously, like every turn, like attacking with a Life Force unit, this thing is going to grow out of control. And that's a lot that you can get out of a 1-drop. It kind of feels like Awakened Student-ish in that it can really take over the game in a way that not a lot of other cards can.
Yeah, this can be an Awakened Student that grows even faster than an Awakened Student in the right deck and has Overwhelm. But it has to be in the right deck. That is the key with Life Force cards. It's important to note with Life Force that if you're going in on it, you got to go in on it hard. You can't waffle. Like, when grading these Life Force cards, especially something like Cult Aspirant, I'm just going to grade assuming I'm in Xenon and I'm picking these early. Just because I realize you got to bake in like the downside, but the upside, especially on something like Cult Aspirant, is so high that I think it's worth speculating on. The other thing, I'm just going to go over the whole Life Force talk now. You can't get cards with Life Force in packs 2 and 4. You can only get them in packs 1 and 3. So it's really important that when you see Life Force cards, if you think there's a chance you're going in on it, you go in. You don't get many chances to get cards with Life Force. And then you try and focus on getting the enablers in packs 2 and 4. Things like Water of Life and Sanctuary Priest are now actually playable, and Sanctuary Priest is actually more than playable. It's a high priority pick if you're in Life Force. I've actually had good success with the Life Force deck so far. It might go down as people start to draft it more, but it's a real deck. I can confirm that much at least. At least the ones that trigger whenever you gain life. The ones that care about large chunks of life are a bit trickier to figure out still. Like you'll still put them in a Life Force deck, but they're a bit different. But this card and Cult Aspirant and a few that we'll talk about later on, they're worth building around. They can grow very, very large. I have Cult Aspirants that are like, a 6/6 on turn 4 or 5. Like they get large quickly. Because it's not like in Power where you can only trigger it once a turn. You can trigger it multiple times per turn if you're gaining life in various ways.
Like attack with your Oasis Seeker and then connect with your, the Skitter, whatever guy. Like that's 2 instances of life gain right there.
Yeah.
So this really is I like that advice. Go deep, go hard, like really mean it, and then especially with the Life Force cards themselves in pack 1 and 3. I think that it'll take a while for us to feel out exactly the mix that you want of Life Force enablers versus Life Force payoffs, and which ones are the ones that are most worth it. This though is an early contender of you can really make this do some work.
Yeah. This card, all that being said, this is one of the better payoff cards. Like just getting a large Overwhelm unit for essentially 1 cost. Yeah, there's a lot of deck building constrictions on it. Is great, but again, I do have to factor in that there are deck building constrictions. This isn't like other time cards like say Twin Brood Sauropod where you just take it and it's great all the time. This is only good in very specific time decks. So sometimes you'll pick it early and speculate, and it'll end up not being in your deck. But ideally with Life Force, you end up being able to, if you're in that deck and the people passing to you aren't, you're going to get all the pieces you need because nobody else wants them. And that's really the power of the Life Force deck, is that you're turning bad cards into good cards. And so that, I think that is a real deck. But there are going to be times where you pick this early and you just fall face first into a train wreck. And that's scary.
Yep, I can buy that. I'm going to put this at B- with those caveats in place, but also understanding that the upside there. Now we have Envelop. This is a 1-cost fast spell. Put an attacking enemy unit into its owner's hand. This feels really narrow. It's like a really bad teleport. Teleport was like decent, but not exciting. And although this costs 1 and that costs 2, I feel that the conditions here that you can't save your own units and it can only be on attacking units as opposed to something that's in a different situation, like you can't clear out a blocker, is a really big downside for something like Envelop. So I'm really not excited on a card like this.
Yeah, I don't like this card at all. It's playable in a pinch, but it's just bad. It's so narrow. Combat tricks are even seeing less play. Weapons are seeing less play. So even those things, like, it's not really applying to. Like, you're running into a lot more mid-range decks, and there's no kind of tempo advantage. You can't use this aggressively. You can only use it defensively. It's not like you can clear out a blocker with it. It's literally only when they're attacking you. And you can't even, like, it even says attacking enemy units, so it's not like you can even develop your own attacking unit to save it or something like that. It's literally just super narrow. So yeah, it costs 1, but it's just not doing enough, not doing what time really wants to most of the time. Like, yeah, I am not into this card at all. Not going to give it an F, but I'll give it a D-. It's just not very good.
I'll put it as a D, but definitely avoid it. Excavation Assistant. This is a 0/3 flyer for 1 and 1-time influence. It is a common, and it has summon, has that scry effect. Look at the top card of your deck. You may put it on the bottom. I think that this card has more interesting applications than constructed because you have pump effects. You can have dedicated warp decks that care a lot about the top card of their library. In draft, because you don't have any ways to kind of synergize with this, or much fewer ways to synergize it. I think this card is a little bit too low impact to really be played in the average deck.
Yeah, I'm going to be there with you. Like, it is an 0/3 flyer for 1, so it could wear weapons nicely, but I don't really think Praxis or whatever is going to be like the weapons deck, or even Combray is going to be the weapons deck. Like, usually weapons are like going to be Fire Justice or Fire Shadow or Justice Shadow, one of those combinations. So it's not even like it has the upside of being like a nice body to buff up with something. So it's really just a weird early game blocker that smooths out your draws, but it's still a bad draw in the mid to late game because, yeah, it can scry once, but it's still a wasted card draw in itself because it's not doing anything. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of this in draft, but I can echo your shadow too constructed with this card. So I'm going to give it a D.
I'm going to give it, a D2. Now we have Wandering Wisp. This is a very bizarre card, in my opinion. This is a 1/1 for 1. It is a legendary 1-time influence requirement. We don't like 1/1s for 1.
No.
And 1/1 for 1 legendary. Why is that? Okay, so let's read the rules text.
We got a 1-drop legendary and a 2-drop legendary in this set. Both first time.
So it has time, so it's like 5-time influence. At the start of your turn, Wandering Wisp gets +1/+1 for each card in your hand. So this is actually closer to a 5-time 1-drop, like an ultra Sand Warrior, than it is an actual 1-drop to me to begin with. It's not like you're playing this on turn 1 and being like, yeah, we're gonna get there with our Wandering Wisp. It'll turn into a 5/5, 7 turns from now. 5-time influence is just a lot. I do not see this fitting into almost any draft decks. I mean, sure, sometimes it's going to grow a little bit, but by that point in the game, it's getting like +2/+2 +3/3 per turn. And your opponent's going to often have a lot of chances before then to either silence it or torch it or whatever. I think this is probably close to an F.
Yeah, I would agree that it's pretty close to an F. I guess if I could think of anything it compares to in Magic, it's like Scute Mob, but it doesn't even grow nearly as fast or as easy to make meet the condition of like 5. As you said, 5-time influence is hard to hit. You're not going to hit that on turn 5 or anything like that. It's going to take a while. And I guess it always counts the card you draw for turn. Like, does the start of your turn coincide with card draw? Like, coming from Magic, the start of your turn is before you draw a card. But I think in this game, it at least always gets +1/+1 from the ability. Like, even if you were empty-handed. I don't actually know. I haven't played with the card. Speculating. But if it's worse than that, that's really bad. But yeah, by the time you do hit 5 time influence, you probably don't have many cards left in your hand. It's just not growing that fast anyways. It's just, yeah, this seems terrible.
Forgotten Find. This is a rare. This is a spell, and it lets you, it's for 2 cost. This is our first 2 cost time card. Play 2 power cards from your void depleted. I don't really know how you're getting large quantities of power into your void, particularly early in the game. So I don't think this really does anything.
No, this is an F. This
Yeah.
is that rare. It's an F. Could do cool things in constructed. Don't play it in draft.
Yep. Agreed. How about we talk about an actually reasonable card?
Oh yeah, this is more than reasonable.
Go for it.
All right, this is Oasis Seeker. It's an uncommon, 2 cost, 1 time influence requirement, and it is a 3/2 for 2. So already good stats. You know, that's an Argenport soldier, not bad. But it has a very nice text box here. When Oasis Seeker attacks, you gain 1 life. So boom, life force enabler at 2. And it's important to note you gain that life before damage happens. So if you've got some units that gain stats when you gain life, they're gaining it as you attack before blockers and damage happens.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the most powerful enablers for the life force deck, especially just, it's a 2-drop too. You get your ball rolling immediately. Like the curve of the cult aspirant into Oasis Seeker on the play is terrifying. Now they're both uncommons, so they're not going to come up every game. But this is one that I'm pretty happy to take this early and just kind of hope to move into the life force deck. And even if I don't, it's a pseudo life steal card, to have in my deck. Mm-hmm. And it'll be totally fine in every time deck. I'm going to put this as a B- because of its enabler potential and because that life force deck is so hungry for good enablers, and just the timing of this works so well in that deck too.
Yep, yeah, I can agree. It's a great enabler, but again, keep in mind, if you're seeing this in a pack with also a life force card, you may want to lean towards the life force card because, well, you can only get life force cards in packs 1 and 3. Again, you can get enablers at least in pack 2. So you've got to bake that in, but if this isn't competing with much else in the pack, like, snap it off. This is an amazing enabler, one of the best ones you can get. But again, because if you're trying to make the life force deck, you can't really afford to take an enabler over a life force card if it's a good life force payoff card. So
yep.
That tension is going to be a tough one to navigate, but still a very good card.
Now we have Sand Viper. This art is like whack. I've looked at this art actually a lot. It's that face thing is totally weird. But this is another one of that cycle that we talked about earlier that has the ultimate ability. I'll actually read the card now.
Yeah.
So 2 cost time card, 1 time influence, 1/2 with deadly. It has the ultimate ability of pay 6 to give Sand Viper +2/+2. This is just really solid. I am personally kind of partial to deadly units because they're able to trade up so often. Really good in mid-range decks. The 1/1 spider from Zet1 wasn't great because of the density of ping effects that were around, and there were a reasonable number of 1/1s around too, like things like Grenadins, etc. The ping effects are, I think, a little bit lower. You have less Grenadins, like you don't have things like assembly line, but also like this card is better against 1/1s because it can just eat them as opposed to trading with them, and it can trade up and it can turn into an actual threat, in the mid game.
Yeah.
This seems like an excellent inclusion in almost every time deck. Especially considering the fact that it's a common.
Yeah, this is a 2-drop at common that is relevant literally every stage of the game. If you draw it late, it's still a 3/4 deadly, and in the early games, it's a 1/2 deadly that can trade with anything, basically, or force them to use removal. That sounds like a good use of a 2-drop to me. This is a big key card in just dragging out the games, making them go long. Time has way better tools at just ground stalling. It's really... They've got to be more concerned about the flyers. I think, like, you also have to keep this in mind if you're trying to win on the ground. Like, a lot of decks have access to this and will be playing a lot of them. This card is good. It's one of the more important cards to keep in mind at common, and that's influencing the format's speed. I think this is a big part of it.
I'm going to rate this as... Yeah, I'm going to go as far as to say B- for this one. It's just so solid, so versatile, goes in every deck. That might be a little bit generous, but I don't think that you're going to regret picking this fairly early, and just understand that it's going to trade with something at some point in the game.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It at first I wasn't quite sure, but it's looked good, and it's played, I think, a little bit better than that even once you see it in action.
Now we have Sandstorm. Now, you've been talking a lot about how you are suspicious about Time's ability to combat flying strategies. Sandstorm is kind of a tool to help deal with that. It is a 2-cost, 1-time influence spell, fast spell. Units can't fly this turn, draw a card. So the play pattern here is that you're in a situation where your opponents are attacking with flying units. You play this. They're put on the ground, you block them profitably, and you draw a card in the process too. So it could end up being a massive blowout, especially against a flyer-heavy deck. If you're not against a flyer-heavy deck, doesn't matter. Cycle it. Just you move on to something better in the mid game, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, I think this card is a nice role player in decks. The comparison might be Levitate, where often you could use Levitate as a gotcha. But Levitate's a bit more flexible than this in that it could pop Aegis or give your own unit flying for lethal, or it also only costs 1 to cantrip. Like, this isn't quite the flexibility of Levitate, but it's also in time. It's not in Primal. These are just different factions with different things going on. I think this will make the cut almost every time in a time deck. I don't know if that means you pick it highly, but it is good. It'll save you from aggressive flyers. Maybe your Sand Vipers will be able to get them once they're grounded. And I think you'll do a good enough job of slowing down your opponent that using up 2 power to get rid of this in, like, say, a time mirror isn't going to be the end of the world. So the nice thing as well is that if your enemy flyer has an Aegis, you can still make it lose flying because it doesn't directly target it. Units just don't have it. They can't fly this turn. It's not like happening. I don't know. It's a weird thing to explain, but I'm pretty sure Aegis does not prevent it, kind of like how Sandstorm Titan works.
Yeah, this is the Sandstorm Titan effect. That's why they put the Sandstorm Titan in the art too, in addition to being flavorful and awesome and stuff. But it has all that same rules implications. It doesn't, like when Sandstorm Titan comes down, all of the flyers are silenced or some garbage like that. It's just no, flying stops.
Yeah.
So I would say this is like a C level card, C plus level card in the average time deck, especially those that aren't like Elysian or have some pairing with good flyers. I think that every time deck is pretty happy to have one, and you don't want to overload on this kind of effect because obviously it's just air in a lot of situations. But C seems fair to me.
Yeah, C seems nice. The first one's good. The second one probably not so much. But even in something like Zena and Life Force or whatever, like it feels like a lot of time decks now are more synergy based. So even just an incidental cantrip to find your cards that work together is just nice.
Yep. Now we have Trail Runner. This is kind of a bizarre card. It is a 1/3 charge, a common for 2 and 1-time influence. I have a very hard time figuring out what deck wants this. Why do we want a 1/3 charge? Like this is the stats that I want my charge on. This is also the only mono time charger in the game, by the way. I checked that the other day. This card bothers me.
Big buff to charge rod decks. Real big buff to charge rod decks. No. I would avoid playing this in draft. It's just not doing anything. It's like a 1/3 blocker in a format where you don't need or want 1/3 blockers. So it's just basically a waste of a card at most points in the game. Yeah, this is, again, it if you need filler in your deck at the last second, this can be a body at least. But you avoid playing this D minus, right? It's not quite an F. It's still at the end of the day has stats, just barely enough to be relevant.
Yep, D minus sounds right to me. Zena Initiation.
Ooh,
is our next one. Tell me about it.
This is some brutal art, but yeah, it's a 2-cost time spell at uncommon, and it gives one of your units +1/+1 and killer. So it's like Predator's Instinct, but double the cost, but also giving +1/+1. So for draft and limited, I think that's an upgrade. I think permanently buffing up one of your units and giving them killer is a lot better than just giving a unit killer for one. For constructed, maybe not, but we're talking about draft here. I think this card is pretty good. I wasn't the biggest fan of Predator's Instinct, but a +1/+1 goes a long way. It means same size units now are not the same size. It means it's just that much more likely to be useful. So, and it's hard to get removal in time. Like you're not going to find a kill spell in time. That's not what you get. So this is what you're going to get. And there are then shenanigans you can get later on with killer via Dark Return or teleporting it back to your hand or whatever. So yeah, I like this card quite a bit. I'm gonna give it a B. I don't know if it's quite a B, but B because it's still conditional removal, but it is in time. B minus. Let's go there. You're generally gonna have larger units anyway in time.
Yeah, I'll agree with you, especially because I do like the Dark Return shenanigans with things like this. I've done some pretty filthy things with killers on the Twin Boost sauropods and stuff like that. This just has a lot of interesting applications and is versatile. Definitely don't overload on this sort of effect. Just Predator's Instinct was a card that most time decks were pretty happy playing one of, at least, and this is just better than that, I think, in almost every respect in draft now. So I'll agree with that.
All right.
Amber Ring. This is one that is this is probably the best of the ring cycle. We went from the granite, which is I think pretty close to the worst. This one's pretty close to the best.
Yeah, it's up.
So Amber Ring. It's a 3-cost, one-time influence, same as the last one's a relic. Once per turn, you may pay 3 to play a 1/1 explorer. So this is then just a machine for putting out 1/1s. That's pretty scary in going long. Now, of course, it still has the same thing of that you're paying 6 power for a 1/1. Over the course of the game, but a lot of time decks are pretty happy to stall the game and you allow the game to go out. I think that every time deck is going to be happy to have one of these because it just has all this different usage. If you get things like Devour in set 1 packs, it's a great combo with this. There's other sacrifice enablers and synergies. This just is the kind of card that it's a great power sink going late, which is something that you didn't get a lot of in the set 1 packs. We have a lot more of that in the set 2 stuff, which I think we all appreciate. I think that this is a really solid card.
Yep. I've seen this in draft a bunch. It's been really obnoxious every time. I echo your statement, though, about the first one's really good. The second one, sometimes I can take it or leave it. I actually ended up drafting 2 of them to test that theory and ended up cutting the second one. It ended up being a little too much for that deck. I think there'll still be decks that could play 2 Amber Rings. Mine just didn't. But yeah, the card's just very good. It's a great power sink, basically a chump blocker every turn, and eventually if you fill up the board and your opponent hasn't filled up their board, you can just suicide attack a bunch of them and get in 4 damage and start filling up your board again. And yeah, just giving yourself a bunch of bodies in the late game is nice to have. It means your opponent either needs to find a large overwhelm unit or take to the skies. And if your deck is built properly, you're ready for that aerial assault as well. And then eventually you'll grind them away with explorers.
I will agree with that. I'm going to put this as B minus.
I'm going to go B. I think I think there's a couple rings and they're all really good. Yeah, you got to get to the late game, but I think it's very doable in this format to do so.
That sounds good. Let's talk about Avarax. Familiar. That's the pronunciation, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe Avarax, I don't know.
Avirax.
Yeah, it's a beautiful card, though.
Tell me about it.
Okay, it is a 3-cost common dinosaur. Dinosaur. 1-time influence requirement. It's a 1/1. Okay. But it has flying, warp, and you get +1 maximum power while it's in play. So it's a lot going on here. A 1/1 flyer for 3, not the best, but not terrible. Again, flying is, I think, pretty valuable in this format. It can just peck your opponent to death sometimes, or just fly above all the nonsense. And yeah, I think this card's doing everything Time wants to do. It has warp on it, so even in the mid to late game, it's not a bad top deck because it's just going to replace itself right away. And in the mid game, or early game development stage, you're okay with playing a 1/1 for 3 with flying on turn 3 if it means you're ramping yourself into your 5 drops the next turn, which Time has a lot of excellent ones. So I've been really, really impressed with this card. I think it's one of the better commons in Time. All that being said, it's still not the most amazing thing. It's just an above average role player, so it's something like a C+. I don't know where it quite lands on the how it compares to the Deadly 2-drop for as far as like there's a lot of competition for best Time common. I think this is just below those.
I think that this is one that we talked before about Initiative Sands and how we were really not a big fan of it because ramping out those few extra the early turns of the game never felt like it did very much because the 2-drops and 3-drops and stuff kind of all just traded with each other. So this ramps you at still the important places of like pushing out your 5s and your 6s, but at the same time doesn't have the downside of costing you a card in the mid to late game. So I definitely respect what this card is doing. Haven't played with it enough to really put a line on it, but yeah, I'll agree with you.
Yeah, because keep in mind with Initiative Sands, like it was only good in your opening hand. Like anytime you drew an Initiative Sands, it felt awful. This does not have that downside. Nope. If you're going to top deck this, you can just play it right off the top of your deck, and then like you just keep going through your deck. It's wonderful, and it's still relevant. Like a 1/1 flyer isn't a great clock or a threat, but it's still there. Like it still exists. It's something. Yeah.
I mean, there are buff effects and everything like that. You can make it happen.
Is greater than the sum of its parts, and the parts aren't that bad.
Disciplined Amenera? Amenera.
Yeah.
Let's go with that. Amenera.
That's a word.
Well, it is now. And it is a 2/2 for 3 with 1-time influence. That's obviously below rate, but it's got an ability. When you gain life, Disciplined Amenera gets +1/+1. So this is obviously another Life Force card. In the Life Force decks, this looks really solid. I don't want to play anywhere else other than that. So... And it doesn't have quite the same ceiling as something like the called aspirant because you get that out early. I guess you don't really get your Life Force, thing going until a little bit later, so it's not that much worse. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say C+, which is fine, not unbelievable, but definitely in the dedicated Life Force decks, you're going to want as many of these as you can get your hands on.
Right. This is the premier payoff card at common for the Life Force deck. Like this is it. Like if you're looking for a Life Force payoff at common, this is the best you're going to get. There's another decent one and a couple other okay ones, but this is the best one. This is your Awakened student, right? It does cost 3 instead of 2, but it can also grow faster if the deck is built properly, and if it's doesn't get there. A 2/2 for 3 is certainly not something we're happy about, but maybe it'll still end up becoming a 3/3 or a 4/4. But again, in the right deck, this can be threatened just like Awakened Student to become a 10/10. It really can, and if other people don't want this, you can get them. This again, like if we're revisiting, do I take this over Oasis Seeker? The answer is yes. I think you do have to do that. You have to take your payoff cards over your enablers because you need to find the payoffs, or why do you want to enable them, right? So that's something to really keep in mind. You can only get these in half the packs, where you can get acceptable enablers in packs 2 and 4, like stuff like Sanctuary Priest, Water of Life, even Spirit Drain. I've played multiple Spirit Drains now since the format started, and it's worth it. Like, the deck is good.
So you'd say then B-, I'm guessing from what you're saying?
Yeah, like if you just know you're in the Life Force deck, I'll say B-, but it's actually even higher than that. This card's really good.
Wow. Okay. Strong words in that one. I'll have to try it out. Next one. This one I'm not interested in trying out. Evelina Valley Searcher. This is a rare for 3 cost, 1-time influence. When you play an explorer, including Evelina, dinosaurs in your hand get +1/+1. Ugh. Okay.
Amber Ring makes explorers. You just have to hold the dinosaurs in your hand forever.
Yeah, sure. Just keep this on the board and play explorers and dirtle around, and maybe you'll get +3/+3. I'm not seeing this card. I just can't imagine I just compare this always to Amber, to Ageless Mentor. I'm like, oh, such an embarrassment.
Well, Ageless Mentor is the best card, but
yeah, I mean, obviously not a fair comparison, but
no, I get it. Yeah, this is like a D- or whatever. It's a 2/2 for 3. Some trinket tech that might someday be relevant, but not. I mean, there are a lot of dinosaurs. I'll give it that. Like, maybe it is better than we think. Like, there is striped Arachnodon and some other stuff, but no, let's not kid ourselves here.
I mean, you've got to be consistently getting +2/+2 or +3/+3 for this to be exciting, and I don't know how you get that density of them in your hand.
Yeah,
too.
They got to
be
in
your
hand.
deck. It's in your hand.
Yep. It's too much. It's not worth it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say D for Little Eve. Shepherd's Horn is next.
All right.
This is a weird one. Might have some interesting ranked applications. I don't feel like you want to play this in draft, but let's read it.
All right. Shepherd's Horn is a 3 power cost relic, 1-time influence, and it says your cards with Overwhelm cost 1 less. When you play a card with Overwhelm, you gain 3 life. So, no. I mean, I guess somehow if you end up in a Life Force deck with a bunch of Overwhelm units, hey, you found a way to trigger Life Force, but I don't know how that happens or what it looks like. Don't pick this card. In draft, I'm going to give this an F.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, I'll just go F, just to be kind of definitive on things. Maybe there's one
speculate, but I don't think it's worth the time. I'm sure.
No, I don't think
somebody
so.
out there will make some awesome Shepherd's Horn deck in draft, and congrats, you did it. I'm gonna advise against trying, unless you like a good challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to see the Nut Cult Aspirant Shepherd's Horn deck. That'd be sweet, but I'm not. I'm calling me suspicious. Yeah. Next, this is the one that we were actually talking about before, off stream, about Archive Curator, and this is my bet for the best time common in the set. It is a 1/4 flyer for 4 and 1-time influence, and it has summon. You may silence another unit. Silence is just such a great ability. We have more power sinks in this set now, so we have more units with powerful activated abilities. Flying is huge, so this can ground another flyer, and it's a flyer itself. It just does so much stuff. It's a tower top patrol, which was a C by itself, and has obviously you lose one toughness. That's not that big of a deal when you already had so much of it, and you get this absolutely killer. Not actually killer, so actually silence, but you get a great summon ability on it.
Yeah, it's silence attached to a unit. That's just in last draft format that was incredible, and in this draft format I don't think that's going to change. And you're happy to just play a 1/4 flyer for 4 already. Like you said, that was already close to acceptable. Time already has problems with flyers, so this is essentially a flyer that can take out another flyer, or can take out a deadly unit on the ground, or can take out whatever. I mean, just silencing is really good. This card is excellent. I'm willing to give it even a B.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I think you're right in saying this is probably the best time common. Again, there's a couple that get close, but this is just doesn't need any synergy, isn't asking anything out of you. It's just going to do what it does, and you're going to be happy to have that effect in time.
Yeah, and I think also this is like one of my barometers is you want as many of these as you can get, basically. Like with the 1/2 snake duder, the deadly one, you can kind of overload on those. This one I just don't think that you can.
Yeah, if you end up with 3 of these, I think you're like, cool, I have 3 of these. Good.
Yeah.
Like, let's just keep rolling.
Bolster is next. This is a fast spell that gives your units +2 health. That does not trigger any life force shenanigans.
It does give you 2 health as well. It does trigger life force.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. Yep. Interesting. I guess it does. This is. Does that mean that it's actually like playable?
This card is playable. Yes. It's a permanent buff to your units as well. So if you've got your Amber Ring going, congrats on a board full of 1/3s or whatever.
You did it.
Yeah, it's not really pushing through damage, but it's going to push through a headache in your opponent's mind. I don't know. I haven't played with this yet. Like I've seen it in packs a couple times. There's always something better to take, so I feel like that's where it's at. But I mean, if you're in the Life Force deck, you are kind of just sitting there stalling, grinding, and then your units now just have a bit more health and you trigger your Life Force once. It is a fast spell, so you can do combat blowout shenanigans. It costs 4. It's a big cost. You know, it'd be a lot better if it gave all your units +1/+1, not +0/+2. But I do think this is actually playable. How good it is remains to be seen. It definitely can blow people out, but the downside's not that bad, really. Like, I don't know. This is a really tough one to evaluate just because it's like, yeah, it's permanent buffs, but they're weird permanent buffs, but also incidental life gain. Outside of Xenon Life Force, I don't know if you ever want to play this, though. Like, I think you'll only play it if you actually also care about the life gain.
I'm going to start this off at a C-, I think.
Yeah.
And kind of try it out a little bit. This is one that we could very easily be wrong on, of like, oh no, this is just too much of
insane. Yeah.
It could either be insane because it just leads to these weird blowout scenarios with alpha strikes on either side, or and plus you're so heavy for hungry for the life force enablers that it fits, or it could just be kind of a do nothing in most scenarios, and so you want to avoid it, or that the 4 is too much of a cost.
Time just has a lot of really solid cards at common that are just slightly better than this, that it's hard to figure out when you'd even pick this card.
That's a good point too. Next we have Camp Physician. This is an uncommon 2/2 for 4 with warp. It has summon, gain 3 life. This is a warp card that I'm less excited about because it's just a little bit too low impact for my taste. I think that it's more interesting in rank because you're just looking for life gain and you can reduce the cost so much with something like the Forge. For a draft, I'm personally looking to probably avoid this. But it's still not unplayable, so I'm going to kind of say C- is my first guess on this one.
Yeah, I think that's right about correct. Like, it does have warp, so that it's... And in time, you're stalling out and grinding out for a long time, so, like, you can reliably warp this. It's just nice. It's incidental life gain. Like, those things are nice. But, yeah, at the same time, again, if you don't really care about the life gain, this card's not that good. Then it's just like a 2/2 for 4 with warp, and that's meh. So again, it's if you care about the life gain, bump it up a bit, but I agree that it'll mostly just be mediocre at best, and that's C-.
Yeah, and like even if you were to read this as 2/2 for 4 draw a card, that still isn't even exciting.
That's a lot better though, especially with the game 3 tacked on. Like that's a lot better, but yeah, again, not amazing. Sure, I can agree with that.
Now we have the snapping brush stalker. So this is a 4-cost double time influence 5/4, and it has the text: when an enemy spell is played, put snapping brush stalker into your hand. Now how big of a drawback or advantage do you think that text is?
If you're relying on it to block, it's a downside. If you're being aggressive with it, I don't think it's that big of a downside. It's effectively unkillable, right? You can't use a removal spell on this. or your opponent can't. You can, but your opponent can't because it'll just go back to your hand. The big thing that stands out here is you can really turn it into upside if you have Predator's Instinct or whatever. You find a way to give this killer. Then you just have this 5/4 for 4 that you just kill something, and if they ever cast a spell, you get it back in your hand, and you get to kill. It lives to kill again. So that's like the dream scenario with this card. Figuring out what the average case scenario of this card is a lot more difficult to figure out. But a 5/4 for 4 is a good body. Not actually that insane, as we're about to find out with this next common. And I haven't gotten a chance to actually see this in action yet, so it's really hard to figure out. But I like it. I think I would play. This will make the cut every time in a deck. I just have no idea how big of a drawback or upside it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, how many spells do you think the average deck has?
On average, like
6?
4 to 6 is like average, right? Something like that. Like not a crazy amount. Yeah. But that might be going up. I don't know.
That's true too. I think that on the assumption that you're attacking, I think this is like a C plus kind of level card. Like I think that you're happy to have it in any aggressively slanted time deck. You really can't have this in a defensive deck because it's just an unreliable blocker, and you're going to spend all this time replaying it and getting tempoed out. But if you are trying to be aggressive, I put it up to I'm fine putting it at C plus. Ultimately, that puts it at about a C minus to me.
Mm-hmm. The other nice thing with it on defense, though, is if you're scared your opponent has a combat trick, block with your Snapping Brush Stalker on it.
That's true.
It's like they use their combat trick and yours just goes back to your hand. As long as they don't have Overwhelm, hey, no harm, no foul there. They just threw away a card. So I don't know. There's just so many weird things that happen with this line of text. It's like hard to figure out. You just don't know when it's going to be your advantage or disadvantage. You just know it's going to annoy somebody. It's kind of hard to control if it's annoying you or your opponent.
Yep. Somebody's going to be very annoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So let's just say C minus, though. You agree with that, I guess, as an average? We don't really know.
Sure. It's going to be a wild time, but
yeah.
Let's move on to another 4-drop dinosaur here. How about that?
Yeah, this one's a little bit more reliable.
Yes, okay. We've got Striped Arachnodon here, or we'll call him Mr. Reliable. 4 costs, double time influence, so same cost as the crazy bouncy dinosaur we just saw. And he's also a dinosaur, and he's a 4/4 for 4. Just a blank text box here. No shenanigans going on. He's just going to show up and be a 4/4 for 4. And
he does not need a text box, man. Just give me those vanilla stats.
Yeah, and I like that. I'll take some vanilla 4/4 for 4 here. I think there's a lot of 2/2 strangers running around, and this will just eat up 2 of those. Or it just totally destroys 3/3s, yada yada yada. It's just a really solid card. Again, it feels like time is pretty deep at the common slot. We were already talking about Curator, Emera, Familiar. Like there's a bunch going on, and this kind of just adds to its riches. I'd say I like this card a lot. So not much to go deep on here, other than it's just a nice body if you want it, and I think that puts it. I don't know. Is it B minus or is it still just C? I don't
think so.
It's just C plus still, just like above average filler. Like not.
Yeah, I think it's
not like taking over a game ever or anything like that. It's just nice.
Yep, I'm going to be pretty confident that it's a C plus quality card, especially because that second time does matter, especially if you're trying to splash or whatever.
Sure.
So
and there are more time decks now that care about synergy or whatever, and this is doing none of those things. Like you're never doing a busted thing with Striped Arachnodon. You're just doing super acceptable stuff from him.
Indeed. Now we have Viper's Bite. This is a fast spell for 4 and 1-time influence. This is a common. Give one of your units deadly. This is 4 is a lot for this kind of an effect, and as a combat trick, it doesn't help your units live.
Yeah.
Which is a really big downside. I'm really not a big fan of this card unless you're able to find something kind of degenerate to do with it. I don't think like this isn't a combat like it is a combo with the Stormcaller, but I just don't think that you want to go there.
Yeah. I
Um,
don't think this is ever worth a card unless there's some you somehow end up in a deck that you can break putting something on deadly that shouldn't have deadly, like Stormcaller. Like if you somehow have one of those, maybe you end up playing a Viper's Bite. Like it kind of, but even there, that just seems bad. Like I wasn't a big fan of Venom Fang Dagger, and I think this is worth like I don't really care about giving a unit deadly at fast speed most of the time. Like I don't know. I'm gonna give it an F. I just don't see it.
F is rough for me. I think that you'll find some situations that you put it on a blocker in a really defensive deck. You put it like on like a 2/5 or whatever, and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of a really niche scenario, and so I would put it as a D. But I'm definitely not excited about
Yeah,
this in my decks.
it's nice on units with quick draw, and then so maybe if you're in like I don't know, a deck with units with quick draw and you have 3 dark returns, I don't know. There's maybe a way you can make this good, but it's going to be really hard to.
Aaran Archaeologist. This is a 5-cost 3/3 one-time influence. Summon, play a sigil of your choice from your deck depleted. I think this is a pretty solid role player in a lot of mid-rangey decks, especially if you are trying to go a little bit higher on the curve. Like, let's say that you're dabbling in Combre, that has a lot of these higher, drops, or if you have something like a Pillar of Mar from Set 1. This is just a really solid, card that allows you, and also fixes you, which is really useful, especially if you're kind of those 1.5 faction decks where you're splashing something like a Mistfield Drake that I think of from Set 1 as a really solid card that you can have as a top end finisher that doesn't require deep commitment to a third color. Obviously you can't play a lot of this because 3/3 for 5 is definitely slow, but it draws you a card functionally and plays it. So I'm pretty happy to have this in my mid-range to big mid-range style time decks.
Yep, this is a worse Amber Acolyte, but I think Amber Acolyte's really good in this format, and this does leap you in the curve if you're trying to get to your 7, 8, even 9 drops in this format. Like you can actually do that. There is a time deck that will want to ramp. Like if you're not in Zena and Life Force, time's doing other things, and I think big rampy time deck is a thing, and this is an important role player in that deck. It's not a payoff, it's not anything like that, but you can play one of these and be pretty happy to jump from 5 power to maybe 7 power the next turn, which is an important leap in time. So, and yeah, the fixing is nice too. If you're splashing a third faction, it can find that sigil out of your deck and put it right into play. So some nice stuff going on there. That's if you have a lot of warp cards, ramping is also nice too. Yada yada yada. Just a nice role player. I think it's a perfect C.
Yeah, I would agree with the C. Like, don't get it twisted that this isn't some sort of like thing that's great, but it's definitely better than the average 3/3 for 5. So take it and play it in your bigger time decks. So now we have the Awakened Sentinel. This is a 3/5 for 5 one-time influence. So Drought Warrior stats, and it has endurance and warp. Jotun Warrior is, I think, kind of the classic D, right? Just
3 filler in a pinch. That is
filler in a pinch.
This is not Jotun Warrior.
The endurance ability, not particularly relevant. Like, it's fine, it's a good bonus, but it's not outstanding. The warp does make this fairly interesting, though.
Yep. Yeah, this is an interesting card. Again, you have to be on 5 power and on top of your deck to warp it, but if you get into the mid to late game and you warp it in, hey, free card. And if not, this can help you get to the mid to late game for whatever else you're trying to do in time. The kind of Awakened Sentinel's biggest issue is that time's so good at gumming up the ground that this is just adding on to the pile, like in a lot of spots.
Yeah.
Like it's not really standing out on its own or doing anything, but again, it's just kind of this solid role player that you're happy to, put in your deck, but it's never going to be amazing or really a reason you won the game or took over the game. It's just, it is what it is, and that's okay. That's okay. It's certainly better than Jotun Warrior, but
oh, yes.
Jotun Warrior also played the role of being of a big fatty in primal, which sometimes had trouble coming up the ground. Time does not have that problem as much. So the 3/5 body for 5 is, even with endurance, is a lot more underwhelming than it even was in primal.
So you're putting it then, I'm just guessing, at like a C- kind of level?
Yeah, I can only put cards with warp so low of a grade. So I think C- is about right. Maybe depending on how the format shakes up, this just might be so like too low impact even in like the slower metagame that it ends up being a D+. But we'll start with C- and see where it goes.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. How about we talk about Battle Tested Stranger?
All right, Battle Tested Stranger is a stranger. Hey, we're seeing a lot of these in this set. This is a 5-cost, uncommon 2/2, but it has Strangers have +2/+2. So all your strangers get +2/+2. This comes in as a 4/4, but your opponent's strangers also get +2/+2. But this is, if you see this in a pack, it's a good reason to start prioritizing strangers higher and moving on in. Because if you can make them that big, that your opponent's gonna hopefully have less strangers than you, and you'll start messing them up.
This card, I think, is a big deal for the Strangers deck.
Oh yeah, yeah. If you see this, you got to strongly consider moving in.
Yeah, I agree with that. It definitely has the it's an uncommon, so you can, like, there'll be some drafts that you see 2 of these, and then all your 2/2, like your 2 drops are now 6/6s. Like, whew, this can really develop quite the beatdown. And because of this, the way that the sets break, the density of strangers is higher now. And so, and in addition to that, like, there's a lot more fixing, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that overall, aside from this card, I think that the Strangers decks got better in the abstract, and that this is actually a very solid addition to the archetype. So I would almost be willing to take this as just a 4/4 for 5 in some time decks. Not excited about it, but maybe I'll give a couple of my other ones a bonus. But definitely, once I'm pushing in that direction, like if I'm seeing this, like, pack 1, pick 3 or something like that, Strangers is looking really tempting.
Yep, just keep in mind the way this works is it is a base 2/2, so if your opponent has random fixing strangers of their own in play, this trades with those. You really got to make sure you're hitting your stranger density as well, or it can get a little awkward. Or if your opponent plays strangers early, prioritize killing them, or whatever. Again, but yeah, I think the power levels here. It's certainly a great payoff card, and yeah, I like this quite a bit. Again, if you're not in strangers, this might end up on the sidelines in certain decks. Like if you only have 2 fixing strangers in your deck, you may want to think about not playing it because of the risk. But I think you need at least 2 other strangers to start thinking about this. I think on its own you can't play it. You need other strangers for sure.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. So it doesn't really fit clearly into the rating scale, but
yeah,
just I think that we've explained it well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in strangers, this is a bomb. Like
oh yes,
but it's also the reason to be in strangers. So like, if your deck has 10 strangers, this is an A level card, and if it's got 3, it's, I don't know, a B- or something. Like, it kind of just depends on where you're at.
Yeah, this can literally be anything from an A- to a D- or something. No, not a D-, but like D.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Beckoning Lumen. This is a rare 5 costs, double time influence, and a 6/4, and it has life force at the end of your turn. If you gain life, draw a card. The base stats are fairly close to Towering Terrazon, which I think was a classic like C level card in set 1, and it also has the potential to be a card draw engine. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, this card is great. If you open this pack 1, pick 1, slam it, and force life force, and you'll hopefully get there and be really happy that you did. But even if you don't end up in life force, a 6/4 for 5 is nothing to be sad about. So does that put it in A- territory? Or because you still need to really push life force to make it amazing, is it more of like a B+?
this is hard. I have to play the Life Force deck more to know kind of how easy it is to get the level of enablers together that I want. I'm going to say B plus for now, just to be conservative. But definitely, if you you pick one, pack one, this you just take every of those like the 1/2. What's the name of that card? It's the
Sanctuary Priest.
No, oh yeah, that one too. That one too. I was thinking about the flyer.
Skeeter.
Skeeter, yeah, Skeeter.
Yeah.
Like you just take all of them that you can, because if you're able to draw 2 or 3 cards off of this, like you're gonna win the game.
Yeah, I'm gonna go A- on this one. I think it's a bomb, and it's. I don't think it's not asking that much out of you. Like if you do build around it, it's insane, and if you end up not building around it, it's still acceptable. That just I like A- there just because the floor is not low at all. Like and the ceiling is insanely high. Like drawing an extra card every turn seems great.
Okay, let us talk about Humbug Swarm.
We've got
Tell me
chat
about it.
arguing about Towering Terrazon's grade now because you called him a C.
Yeah. That's it. There was someone was saying C plus. I think the C plus is fine. I don't think that it was a B.
Yeah.
B is very much an exaggeration, but I would definitely say that he's somewhere in the C range. Just whether it's C or C plus is, I think, really the argument.
We are probably going to have to re-review set 1 at some point because of how.
Oh, we're definitely going to.
Boy, that's going to be fun. Jeez. All right. Yeah, so we've got Humbug Swarm here. It's a 5-cost uncommon spell with double time influence requirement. And you play 3 1/1 Humbugs with flying. All right. I like that.
So 3/3 flyer for 5 was also roughly a C level card in set 1, correct? Like that, like something like what would you rate Huru Fledgling at?
Yeah, C-ish.
C-ish.
Yeah.
So this I think is probably better than that because there's a little bit more ways to abuse this with any sort of pump effect, which exist.
Mm-hmm.
So, although this isn't a blowout type of card, this feels really solid.
Yeah, this is either just going to be solid in a deck or like one of the best cards in the deck if you're actually like focusing on go wide tokens pump. Like if you end up in that archetype somehow, it just gives you a bunch of flying bodies. Time has access to a powerful silence at common, so a lot of times you can just clear out the sky for the Humbugs and they can just start getting to work. I think this card is very nice in the history of Magic Draft formats. At least any card that gives you multiple 1/1 flying bodies has been at least good, if not broken or format warping. I don't think this is format warping at uncommon 5 cost, but still pretty good. I'm gonna give this a B minus.
Yeah, I would say actually probably B. Just I think that I really respect the number of pump effects that you have around, like this with the like the Fire Main Lion, I think the name of it is.
Yeah. Game's over.
Like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of rares, like both between set 1 and set 2.
Unlock potential, yada yada.
Yeah, even Rally is terrifying.
Yeah.
So I don't think that like the B is like you just have a lot of room to move up. With just the baseline of 3 1/1s for flyers for 5, which I think is very close to B level. Just at, if you didn't have any other ways to enable it.
Sure. Yeah, I could see that.
Time Weaver. We have 3/4 for 5. That has double time influence, and the summon ability is basically just slow. The card's slow. I'll read it out though. Summon double the cost of a card in the enemy player's hand. What do you think about this little lady?
I think this is pretty good for this format. Now that I've played this format more, a 3/4 for 5, obviously not the greatest body in the world. We were just giving Jotun Warrior crap for being a 3/5 for 5, but slow on a stick is pretty cool. If you curve out into this, you can take one of their really expensive cards and make it even more expensive. Of course, certain time decks might not be able to kill them before they still get to play it, but even without the slow, maybe necessarily really delaying a card, you still get information about what's in their hand, which is valuable. So it adds up to a nice bit of stuff. Yeah, if you top deck this, you're not super happy about just adding a 3/4 to the board and it whiffing or whatever. But I think it's good. Is it great? That remains to be seen. I'm skeptical of that how it compares to some of these other higher level commons and uncommons, but I think it's okay. It just might be a little tough to figure out when to draft it and how it's going to make the cut.
What would you rate it?
I think I'm just going to start at C plus for now. Like, it seems like a nice thing to have, but I'm not going to go out of my way for it.
Yeah, that's roughly where I would start it too. C plus is kind of it. Definitely has to get a bit more of the feel of the speed of the format, but I think that's a really solid place to begin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you ever hit a 10 drop or a 9 drop though, whew, nice. You did it.
Yeah, you can definitely do some nasty stuff, but not every deck is gonna have the best.
I didn't have that in draft, but I had it in Forge, and I hit my opponent's 6 drop with it, and that felt good.
Nice.
It was now a 12 drop.
Now we have the Waystone Infuser. This is a 2/6 for 5 with double time influence. It's a rare.
Yeah.
It has warp, and your power cards have warp. Draft is really about card advantage in a lot of games. Like, either basically almost there are 2 categories of games. There are games in which somebody assembles a threat that the other person can't address, and that just takes over the game.
Yeah.
Or it's about just a grindy card advantage, battle back and forth in which the person who, draws slightly better often wins. I mean, like, this is just simplifying, but that's often what draft feels like. This is a card that can provide you 3, 4, 5 cards over the course of the game without very much difficulty. Starting with the turn that it comes into play. That it draws you 2 cards by coming off the top of your deck and giving you a power off the top of your deck. Although this doesn't look very flashy, this could just be a bomb.
Yeah, this is a bomb. This card, it's a 2/6 for 5, can just survive basically everything. It dodges almost all the common removal. It just gives you crazy card advantage in a long game, and I think time is going to go long in a lot of games. I don't think there's really an uncommon that I could ever see picking over this. Like, I'm going to put this at least A-, maybe A, but it doesn't fly. It doesn't actually finish the game on its own, so I can't quite put it at like A or A+ level. But I still think it just gives you so much advantage in a long game that I think it even earns itself like an A- with this kind of body and this effect. It's really powerful.
Yeah, I guess my only concern about this kind of card is that going back to the quadrant theory kind of idea is it doesn't do anything if you're kind of behind already. You kind of have the board stabilized. Yeah, I mean, sure, yeah. But usually the problem with if you're struggling against grounder beaters as time, you already have serious problems.
Sure.
And mainly you're losing something like, an unblockable or a flyer or something like that. And this doesn't help solve those problems, but it really carries your, game plan to a next level. I'm going to start at A- or B+ kind of range. I'll say A-. I'll say A- because I think this is really, really strong.
Like, even when it's not warping out power, it's giving you information. You're not drawing power. True. Like there's just so much amazing things about this card that I just love it. I just love this card.
Now let's talk about Pack Hunt. I think this card might end up being fairly important, but I'm not sure yet. 6 cost, 1-time influence. It's a spell, not a fast spell. It's a spell. Your units get +2/+2 this turn. So the way that I'm envisioning this is that we've talked a lot about these ground stally, ultra dirtily timed decks. And I can see the games that have this ending in one of 2 ways. Either you kind of just grind them into oblivion, in which you kind of trade cards back and forth. You force them to double trade into your big animals, and you eventually cobble together a win through that. Or you just build all this giant board stall. You play something like Pack Hunt. You press A and then the space button, and your opponent presses the options concede button. Is kind of how I'm seeing it. It just means these sort of group pump effects just makes blocking ultra impossible, especially if you've dealt any damage to them in the early to mid game. It just means that all of your units are lethal half the time.
Yeah.
And And often how it works is that even if your alpha strike that turn doesn't win you the game, the fact is that they're just decimated. Their resources have been annihilated. So next turn, you're able to finish them off.
Sure.
You really can't have too many. Like if you have too many of these, you'll feel it, because this is an ultra clunky card at 6. But I think that there's going to be a good number of time decks, especially anything with like the Humbug Swarm or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
This seems useful.
It's useful but narrow, I think is the biggest problem with Pack Own. It costs 6, so you're paying, Synchronized Strike costs 2 and gives all your units +1/+1, and it's fast speed. Okay, well this is double that, but slow speed. But it also costs 6. Like 6 is a lot, but okay, time can get there. I just think there's just not that many decks that want this, and the ones that do, I think you'll be able to pick up at Pack Hunt very late and just grab it.
Yeah.
Like, you definitely don't need to prioritize this. You'll probably incidentally get it, and it might make the cut if you're a really swarmy token deck, or a swarmy flyers deck maybe. But ultimately, if you're in a go wide deck, this isn't really the payoff card or something like that, but it can be the finisher if this is the one you end up with. But I'm not going to prioritize it highly, and if I end up with a deck that maybe wants it, hopefully I have one that I've already drafted. But ultimately, I'm going to give this a D. Like, I just don't see it.
I think D is a little bit harsh. I'm actually going to say C-, but like on the assumption that it's really specific types of decks that want to have like exactly one copy of this.
It's an okay finish.
Want to play the
sure.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I'm seeing it. Definitely, I don't think you have to prioritize this though.
Mm-hmm.
Now let us talk about. I have to switch pages.
Wait.
Oh, this old.
This is a decent card.
The Plate Father has arrived. Tell me about it.
All right, Plated Goliath is a dinosaur, one of the better dinosaurs you'll ever see. 6 cost, double time, uncommon. It's a 7/5 with Overwhelm for 6. Oh, and it also has Warp. Warp. This thing is just a pile of value and death and destruction, and is wonderful. It's just a wonderfully big, monstrous dinosaur that's going to hit your opponent hard and occasionally give you even more card advantage than that.
Yep. So this is when we were first talking about this in sort of our early episodes, we said that it reminded I said that it reminded me of Twin Brood Sauropod in some ways, not quite at that level, but
right.
This is definitely something that, like, in those late game scenarios, if you're able to drag out the game at that point, if you're able to warp this off the top of your deck, like, that's the kinds of plays that it's gonna be part of the grinding your opponent into dust element of your game plan. So,
and if it's in your opening hand, you don't mind that either.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Towering Terror is on there, and it's
even better than that, man. That 7 strength with Overwhelm is huge. Like, that is you're pushing some amount of damage through with this thing, like, every time.
Overwhelm is an easy ability to undervalue.
Yeah,
I think, and it's going to matter in a card like this. So I'm going to definitely say I'll start this at a B.
Okay.
And what do you think?
I'm going to go B+. I'm gonna go B+. Sure. Like if Waystone Infuser was A-, and say you just mentioned the Twin Brood Sauropods was probably an A-, honestly. Like, this is a step below that, but still very good.
Sentinel's Might. This is a weird one. This is a legend for 6 time influence, and it has Life Force. Your units get plus attack, plus power, plus health, equal to the health you've gained this turn.
Yeah.
Okay, so what number? Like, let's just say that this didn't have any Life Force number on it, or like text on it, and just gave you a number of +3, +3, +4. Like, what number does this have to have on it for you to be like, that is a, I don't know, like, B level card?
2.
2?
Yeah, give all your units permanently +2/+2. That's worth 6 for sure.
So I think that one of the things with this, and I've noticed this in my constructed set review, is the timing of this is also really strange, because the Life Force, you want to play your pump effects before you attack,
sure,
right? And a lot of your life force enablers are things like your Oasis seekers. It's things like your your life steal cards. And so it's actually hard to get the life steal the life force value on it before attacking.
Sure.
So it almost feels like you have to combine this with a different spell to get that same effect, or you have to play it post combat.
Right. Okay, well, let's say you have, for some reason, like a 3/3 lifesteal out, but you've got, I don't know, 3 or 4 other units on the board. Would you suicide attack your 3/3 lifesteal to give your other 3 or 4 units +3/+3?
Yeah, that sounds fine. That sounds fine.
Now, of course, if you have no life gain going, this card does nothing. But again, it's a legendary card, so you're really only going to see it when you're opening a pack. So I think this is worth taking and trying to build around if you see it pack one, pick one. Like, it's a pretty wild payoff. Like, the Life Force deck, I've played it now, and so it's really good at just stalling and just buying you time, and eventually you just do something dumb, and Sentinels could be one of those do something dumb spells.
Yeah, this is...
Like,
I think this is just a build around. Let's just say that this is a build around, and that, like, if you're able to get to that level, like, it could easily be an A level card in the right deck.
Oh yeah,
you just
this
have
is
to
a
push
crazy
really hard
in the right deck. Like, an absolute insanely unbeatable card. But if you pick it, there'll be drafts where it also does nothing. But if you get there, this will win you so many games. Like, it's a permanent buff to all your units. It's like absurd. Like, once you hit +3/+3 or plus, like, heaven forbid +4/+4 or more, like, the game's over. You just won. Like, but that's not an easy thing to do. This does cost 6. You've got to do other things that turn, but I mean, if you pick this and then you get hooked up with a Water of Life somewhere pack 2 and you just throw away 2 cards to give all your units +6/+6, hey, you won the game. Congratulations.
Holy moly. So, yeah, that's actually okay. That's a good one to point out.
There's just dumb stuff like that, and I think that is a big part of this format, is just doing dumb, unbeatable stuff because you just have the time to do it. Like, especially in time. Like, I'm going to say the word time a lot here, but it's just how it works. Like, you just in the Life Force decks, like, I had a draft yesterday. I think we only ended up playing like 7 games, and it took 3 hours. It was absurd. Like, the games just took forever. There was a game, like a couple games I almost won by decking or whatever. It's just obscene. You can really grind in this format if you want to, and I think this is a way to stop the grind and just kill your opponent.
Okay, I think that covers that card, but that's definitely interesting.
Yeah, that card's insane. I don't know. I'll have fun with it and also lose to it.
Yeah, I definitely want to see the nut Sentinels in my deck. That'll be sweet. Voyaging Lumen is a common 5/5 for 6 with 1-time influence, and it has the ability Life Force. At the end of your turn, if you gain life, play a 1/1 Wisp. 5/5 for 6 is definitely below rate, not astonishingly so, but it's it's noticeably behind. The Life Force payoff, like generating a 1/1 per turn, is okay. You need to have some way to take advantage of those, I think, because usually by that point in the game, it's kind of a board stall and the 1/1s aren't doing a ton.
Right.
But they're not nothing. So I think that if you're not doing... okay, my grade would be this. If you have no life gain at all in your deck, this is something like a D+.
Yeah, maybe even a D, honestly. Like, a 5/5 for 6 is just not that good.
Yeah. If you have a dedicated Life Force deck, I'm going to put this, and like you can consistently get 1 life per turn, I'm going to put this at a C+. How does that sound?
Even a C+, I think, is a little high.
Yeah, I can see that.
This is, I think, it's a Life Force payoff because it has the word Life Force in it, but I think it's the worst payoff. Like, just 5/5 that's giving you 1/1 a turn. It's not like it's even every time you gain life, get a 1/1. You can't do, like, mid-combat shenanigans or whatever. You're just getting a 1/1 every turn, which, sure, it's something. But even then, it's like, all right, you get 6/6 worth of stats for 6, and then eventually 7/7 and yada yada, but you have to jump through hoops to do it. It's a card where if you're in the Life Force deck, it'll make the cut at least, but you're going to get this later on in a pack. It's not a high priority pick. It's just nice to have around, I guess. And that puts it more like, even if you're in life force, closer to like C minus, honestly.
So this next card is a good friend of yours, I've heard. Yeah, one of your kinsmen.
Oh yeah, man, this guy, he's a fun time at parties.
Tell me about him.
All right, we got Reinar Hunt Pack. 7 cost legendary dinosaur, double time influence requirement. It's a 7/10 for 7.
What?
That's a lot of stats there.
Yep.
And it has warp. And it has ambush while on top of your deck. So, if you can warp it in, because it's on top of your deck, you get to ambush it in, which is awesome. But even just the 7/10 for 7/10 for 7 is not bad. That's really hard to deal with. It's king of the ground, that's for sure. I don't know, this seems awesome. Yeah, it doesn't have flying or any kind of evasion. It's just very large, and occasionally it'll kill a unit. I've already had somebody ambush this against me and kill one of my units.
Ugh.
I've already had that happen, because that's the life I live. And then they untapped and played Vera. It was a great game.
Oh, that sounded like it was pretty competitive.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was really close. But yeah, the card seems pretty sweet. Also, it's a legendary, so you're probably just going to take it for the stones anyway. So, yeah, bomb. Let's go with bomb. I don't know the exact letter grade, but high enough that you'll take it.
Yep. Yeah, I'll put it at A minus, but
sure.
Yeah, definitely very playable.
Yeah.
Belching Behemoth is an 8-drop for 1-time influence. It is a 6/6, and when it summons, you get 6 life. Clearly an enabler for the life force decks.
Mm-hmm.
As we kind of seen, those decks tend to be a little bit more aggressive slanted. Like a lot of the things like the 1/1 and the 2/2, you kind of want to get those kind of rolling early, and you want to have incremental life gain just every turn rather than one big dosage of it. This is fine as a top end finisher, but 6/6 for 8 is pretty inefficient.
Yeah, it's not a great card. It is totally just a filler role player, but 8 cost is very much a real thing that's reachable in this format. It's not, 8 was close to unplayable, or it had to be a bomb in just set 1 draft. I don't think that's the case in set 2 draft, at least so far. Maybe as people get more efficient and figure out the aggro archetypes, it will eventually get to that point. But for now, it's fine. Not great, but it does gain 6 life. That's not an insignificant amount. And if you have the life force cards that care about how much life you gained, this card's pretty sweet at doing that. If it ends up being 2 6/6s because you have the invoker or whatever, like that's wild. But again, that's dependent on you having other near bomb level cards. So not a high priority pick, but you'll play one of these in life force decks usually, I think. So I don't know, C minus.
C minus sounds,
if you're not in life force,
right.
Probably never playing it though.
You life force or like a fairly defensive orient,
yeah, sure.
But quick note, great combo with Sentinel's Might if you have that 14 power.
Oh.
Give your whole team +6/+6.
That's easier to do than you think. It's easier to do than you think, but still very hard.
It is totally hard.
Still very hard.
Okay, so that was time.
Yeah.
A lot of really good commons, especially in that mid section.
Yeah.
From what I saw.
It feels like time is good at like stalling and doing fair things. It's just how are you finishing the game? What's your unfair angle to actually win once you've stalled the board? That's difficult for time to figure out right now. That's kind of the puzzle to work out, because there's just good stuff all over the place in time. It's just how are you actually ending the game once you've stalled it out that you need to figure out.
Okay, so are we ready to move on to Justice?
We're ready, I think.
We are ready. Okay. Let's start with Crown Watch Squire. This